Yeah, the same age group we do not want drinking Coca-Cola now or in the future.
Selwyn?
I think Nalini's put it quite right. I think the concerns are there. Why would you market something mum and bub? The connection is definitely there. And we also know the consequences of making that a habitual kind of thing. So does marketing actually lead toward habitual drinking of it? Well, that would be the desire of the marketeers, wouldn't it? And that's where the concerns would come from.
ASA spokesperson told Stuff the authority did not have jurisdiction over product packaging, but bottles featured in ads would be covered by the the standards codes. Is it just a pet name?
I don't know.
No, I think,
And what about 18 cans in a carton?
Yeah. Let's go to common sense.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Selwyn Manning, Nalini Baruch, thank you so much for being with me on the panel. And thank you for your feedback this afternoon. I'm Wallace Chapman, back tomorrow. See you then.
Whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. E haere nei, eyewitnesses describe a helicopter corkscrewing several times before plunging to the ground north of Kaikoura. 2 people are dead and 3 are seriously injured. We talked to a former rugby player with a suspected brain condition caused by repeated hard knocks. Sparks from a construction site are being blamed for the latest fire on Christchurch's Port Hills. A former rugby coach gets community detention after seriously injuring another man by shoving a pool cue up his backside. Slip, slop, slap and scan. The government lays out contingency plans in case of a COVID outbreak over Christmas. And the America's Cup Village is officially open.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, ko Susana Leata tēnei. Residents in the North Canterbury town of Clarence helped pull 3 seriously injured people and 2 who had died from a helicopter that crashed on the beach this afternoon. Emergency services were called to the crash around 20 to 1, about 60 kilometres north of Kaikoura. 5 people were on board the helicopter, including 3 children. 3 injured people have been airlifted to Christchurch Hospital. Local resident Ian Merton says he was having a cup of tea at home when he saw the helicopter start going around in circles, then fall from the sky. He raced to help and says locals wanted to get people free of the wreckage in case it caught fire.
It was not very good. There was a helicopter on its side and people screaming and people trying to get people out of the helicopter. Because it's on its side, it was very awkward to get to.
And you can hear more from Mr Merton soon on Checkpoint. Holiday makers have been warned they must be prepared to hunker down and stay put if COVID-19 re-emerges over the summer break. The government has outlined how it would respond to a case in the community during the holiday period. New Zealanders are being asked to prepare for their plans to change and carry extra supplies in case they are caught up in an outbreak of COVID-19. Ashley Bloomfield says if there is an outbreak at a campsite or festival, people would need to stay where they are while officials assess the situation.
Just make sure you know who can feed the cat or the dog and just what else you might need to do. And especially if you're in a remote location that you may just take some extra supplies and try and keep in contact with the news just on a regular basis.
Ashley Bloomfield says if the outbreak had spread widely, everyone would need to return home and alert levels would be considered. Sparks from a construction site are being blamed for the fire in Christchurch's Port Hills that led to 16 homes being evacuated today. 4 choppers with monsoon buckets and 28 firefighters with hoses managed to contain the fire by this afternoon, and residents have been allowed back into their homes. The blaze burnt through 16 hectares of tussock and scrub and came within metres of a handful of homes in Clifton following 2 days of fires in the Port Hills last week. Assistant Area Commander Mike Bowden says workers cutting steel sent sparks flying onto tinder-dry grass. A former rugby coach has been sentenced to community detention for severely injuring a man by penetrating him with a pool cue. Benjamin Keach pleaded guilty in September to causing injury with reckless disregard. The former Clutha Rugby Football Club coach was initially charged with sexual violation after he stabbed the victim in the backside with a queue while the young man was danced with his pants down at a Balclutha bar in June. The victim's internal injuries required surgery and will require further medical attention. Keech told police he did it as a laugh. But prosecutor Craig Power told the court it's no laughing matter.
Well, I would describe it, sir, as a forceful upward thrust with the pull cue as it was, with two hands. That's not some tomfoolery, give someone a bit of a poke.
Craig Power in Dunedin District Court today. The gas fitter who worked on a Christchurch home before it exploded last year has been ordered to pay more than $134,000 in emotional harm payments. Gregory Smith worked on the gas fire installed in the Northwood home the day before it exploded, destroying the house and injuring 6 people. In the District Court in Christchurch today, he was ordered to pay emotional harm payments to the victims. Judge Tony Zohab also ordered him to complete 325 hours of community service.
Mr. Smith is a good citizen, a decent man who's made a terrible error of judgment which has had significant consequences for him, his family, and also for all of the victims who have suffered as a result of this incident.
Judge Tony Zohab during sentencing today. It's 4 minutes past 5. A lawyer representing New Zealand players who are suffering the long-term effects of head injuries is urging New Zealand Rugby to reveal the results of research it has on the issue. Former All Black Nemia Tialata has joined the legal action against World Rugby over brain injuries suffered while playing the game. His lawyer Tim Castle wants New Zealand Rugby to release any information they have about the effects of concussion since World Rugby introduced new head injury protocols in 2015.
Provide us with the information that demonstrates the value of the protocols that have been in place for the last 5 years, what the information that they have reveals, to provide levels of comfort for current players and future players that the information that is available is being not only well used, but can lead to even greater protections.
Tim Castle. Black Caps captain Kane Williamson remains on baby watch but is still on track to play for the Black Caps in the T20 series against Pakistan. Williamson missed the second test win over the West Indies to be with his wife in Tauranga. Coach Gary Stead says the pair are still awaiting the arrival of their first child, and the plan is that he will turn out for the second and third T20s on Sunday and Tuesday. Meanwhile, all-rounder Colin de Grandhomme has been ruled out of the 2-test series against Pakistan with a foot injury, but it's hoped that first-choice spinner Ajaz Patel will be available. That's the news.
Calls for change at the top of Oranga Tamariki.
This is an organisation that deals with 70% Māori children and therefore it deserves Māori leadership.
The All Blacks draw a familiar World Cup foe.
We all know the French very well, the mercurial French, sometimes unbeatable, sometimes their own worst enemies.
And what price a travel bubble with Australia?
Kiwis, and I'm one of them, certainly don't like being considered the state of Australia, but essentially that's what we're moving into.
Mate, tell him he's dreaming. Morning Report, weekdays from 6, on air and online.
Now the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. All the North Island fine weather apart from a few areas of morning and evening cloud. Nelson and Marlborough fine, Buller and Westland mostly cloudy, fine spells during the afternoons, patchy drizzle tomorrow morning. Canterbury mainly fine, however some coastal low cloud this evening and tomorrow morning. Otago fine tonight, cloud increasing tomorrow, rain spreading north to Dunedin late afternoon or evening. Southland fine tonight, rain developing tomorrow afternoon. Fiordland, areas of drizzle developing this evening, turning to rain tomorrow. Chatham Islands, cloudy periods. RNZ National, it's coming up to 7 minutes past 5.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. A grey, mangled mess of rotors and perspex was blonging scattered everywhere. That's the scene that greeted those who rushed to help in the aftermath of a helicopter crash at Kekerengu north of Kaikoura. 2 people are dead and 3 are seriously injured after the chopper that appeared to be coming into land corkscrewed several times before plunging to the ground near the river mouth. Ian Mertens has a B&B nearby. He jumped on his quad bike and raced to help when he saw the helicopter dropping from the sky.
Well, basically, it just saw a helicopter coming into land and then it got out of control, started twisting round and round and then did the dive, bang, onto the beach.
So how far away was it, Ian, when you first spotted it?
From me, about maybe 100 metres max. So I could see the whites of their eyes, put it that way.
So what did you do when you saw that it was in trouble and going down?
Oh, yeah, I just jumped on my quad bike and went across the road to try and help out, see what I can do there.
And so when you got there, what could you see? What did it look like?
Carnage. Absolute carnage. Helicopter on the side, people screaming, people on the beach. There's quite a few helpers there, so that was really good. Yeah, so we got people out of the helicopter and made them comfortable, really, until the authorities arrived.
Ian, how many people did you help out of the helicopter? How many were there in total?
I don't know how many in total, but I helped 1, 2, 3, 4 out of the helicopter. A family, 3 children. 3 children and I think one adult with a mother, I think.
So an adult woman, possibly the mother, and a group of children?
Yeah, 3 children, and the pilot, of course.
And Ian, when you say children, what kind of age do you reckon?
Probably the youngest would be 7 or 8. And the next young fellow would be about 10, and the other girl would be in the teens. She was a bit heavy to carry out, but the other one's all right.
So, do you know anything about the flight itself, what they might have been doing?
No, I think they were just coming into land to have a cup of coffee, basically, at the store. That's what happens quite regularly. So, and I think something may have just gone amiss on his way down. I'd say that he would have been about 20 metres, maybe 30 metres, and then that's when it all happened, as quick as that. Yeah, not good.
So, Ian, do you have helicopter flights and scenic flights come by your area quite frequently?
Quite frequently, yes.
Was this a helicopter that you recognised?
No, there's so many different ones that come in. No, I don't even know what brand or who runs it or anything. Just that it was a big grey mess on the beach.
When you arrived, can you tell us a bit about where the helicopter was and what kind of condition it was in?
It was mangled. It was on its side and rotor blades and perspex blooming screens everywhere, belongings everywhere. Yeah, I would have been about the 5th or 6th on the scene, I suppose. Yeah.
And was it in the water, Ian?
Just on the edge. Just on the low tide. We had to walk in water to get them out,
And how difficult was it to get them out of the helicopter, given that was pretty smashed up?
Oh, really awkward, because there's nothing to get up on the helicopter to pull them out with. So it was awkward to get on the side of the helicopter to drag, bring them out.
So how did you manage that?
Oh, we in the panic or whatever, you just do it, jump up and do it. Yeah.
Was anyone on board able to speak to you, Ian? Were they conscious?
Oh, yeah, there was 1, 2, 3 or 4 were conscious, yeah. Yeah.
And you say there was help there. Who was there by the time you arrived in terms of emergency?
Just locals and tourists.
How are you doing after seeing that, Ian? I can imagine it would not be.
Oh no, I'm all right. Yeah. I'm okay. Just when you think about it, it's quite sad. Someone's good holiday stuffed.
Terribly sad.
Yeah.
Terribly sad. When you noticed the helicopter, could you hear anything out of the ordinary?
No, not at all. It was. You know how you can hear the rotor blades whacking through the air? Well, it was just normal, and then all of a sudden, twist, round, and then dive down into the surf. So we've got 3 helicopters there now. 2 of them are just taken off. Fire brigade, police, everyone's all here, ambulances. So, yeah.
So I understand that you comforted some of the people who came off the helicopter. What were you able to say to them?
Oh, just just as you say, it's all, just it's okay. And the wee one was saying, my mum, where's my mum? I said, your mum's okay. Whether she was or not, I do not know. But, yeah.
And how long was it, Ian, before ambulance and emergency services managed to get there?
Oh, about an hour and a half, I suppose. Hour and a quarter, hour and a half.
So for that time, what were you doing and what was happening with the people?
Just comforting the people, and dragging the helicopter out of the surf. Yeah, and just tidying up the beach. Like, they obviously want to know what the cause of the accident was, so we're just gathering all the bits and pieces and stuff off the beach.
Ian, was there anyone there who knew first aid?
Oh, yeah, there was. It was a tourist, actually. He was with his family in a camper van. He and his wife and his 3 children. He was excellent. I don't know his name or anything, but he was really good. And he just sort of directed people and made sure everyone was okay, and made sure that the people who were looking after the injured were all okay, and organising blankets and stuff like that to keep them out of the breeze and keep them warm. Yeah.
And so was that person able to help with any particular injuries?
Well, I think no, because, I think, I'm not sure, but someone managed to get a first aid kit and bandaged a young lad's head up a wee bit. Yeah.
So what kind of day is it like there, Ian, in terms of the weather?
Brilliant. Beautiful day.
Calm?
Calm. Well, the wind got up soon after, but it's calm, yeah. Lovely day.
And that's Ian Mertens. He's one of the people who rushed to the scene of that helicopter crash north of Kaikoura and was helping the people on board. A fire started by sparks from a construction site has forced residents to flee their homes in Christchurch's Port Hills. 16 properties have been evacuated and smoke can be seen across the city. Joining us now is Fire and Emergencies Assistant Area Manager for Christchurch Metro, Mike Bowden. Mike, bring us up to date. What is it like there at the moment?
Yeah, hi Lisa. Look, we're very confident that we've got it under control, and we've got some crews, some rural firefighting crews that have come in, and they'll be working through the night to keep an eye on the fire. So we're happy with where it's at now.
So what kind of area is it covering, and what does it look like?
We've estimated from the helicopters it's about 18 hectares that have been involved, mostly grasses, scrubs, a little bit of native bush and so on. But it has, we've been able to protect all of the properties that were above that space, Lisa. So.
Yeah, I'm watching some of the video now of the helicopters with the monsoon buckets flying overhead. Is it a particularly difficult site, obviously by the nature of the hilly terrain?
Yep, look, all of the Port Hills and Christchurch are particularly difficult sites one way or the other, and that's why, we do go in with a heavy helicopter response, because it's very, very difficult for people on foot to get into a lot of those, some of the terrain around there. So that's why we aggressively use helicopters very early on down here.
What can you tell us about what sparked it?
Look, I'm only aware of the same information that you've had, Lisa, that apparently some people involved with the building site. I don't know any more about that, and we will be carrying out a thorough investigation, as you can imagine.
Mike, I know there's limited information at the moment, but any idea how far away that site is from the main burn?
It's fairly obvious from the wind patterns, Lisa, so it's the site's possibly 20 metres away from the edge of the fire.
You've got 16 homes still that have been evacuated. Where have those people gone?
No, all of those people have been allowed back into their homes, Lisa. We're very happy that we've secured all of their properties, and they've been going back in over the period of the last couple of hours. So
it's been a bit of a tough week, hasn't it?
Yeah, well, it just shows you that the risk is really high, and particularly Christchurch does have a problem around that urban interface area. The Port Hills are notoriously difficult places to fight fires in. And that's why we do have an aggressive attack and an enhanced response. So we just plead with people to be really careful and making sure that they play their part wherever they can and keeping themselves safe and others.
Given it looks as dry as a bone and the difficulties you've had there already, is it somewhere where people should be using that kind of machinery that could cause sparks?
it's a little bit hard to kind of to lay something down on the ground. But clearly, people using anything that can generate a spark really do need to have some way of stopping a fire. So running out a hose line, for example, on a building site is something very practical that you could do, or a bucket of water. There are some measures you could take if you thought enough about it.
And what restrictions are in place at the moment?
Well, there's a restricted fire season starting from midnight tomorrow night, unfortunately. So we're hoping that everybody will require a permit to light a fire in that case. So the whole of Canterbury goes into that phase as of tomorrow night. So we're just urging people to be very careful tonight. And through your medium, I'd just like to point out, Lisa, we will have a drone team operating in the area from about 5 o'clock tomorrow morning. So just to residents to be reassured that we use that for looking for hot spots, and it works better when it's dark than during the day.
So you'll be going early in the morning tomorrow then?
Yeah, we will. Yeah,
with the drone?
Around 5 o'clock we'll have some drones up doing some mapping and some hotspot checking.
And when will you have that information?
Oh, they'll feed that all back to us. We'll have it by 8 o'clock, so that the daytime crews will have all the information about where any hotspots that may be present will be. So it just directs our attack to, a better location.
So, Mike, just talk us through a little bit overnight. Who's going to be there? What are they going to be doing?
We do have some crews there. We have approximately 30 personnel working there tonight, and they will generally be looking for hot spots. We leave a lot of the hose protection lines out overnight, so they're very easy to just pick up if there's little flare-ups. We don't engage in particularly aggressive firefighting overnight, but we just need to make sure for the residents' well-being that we do have people there and on standby and ready to go.
And if there's any issues, what will happen with the residents? How will they know?
Look, we will be able to we'll be able to get that information to the residents. It's easy road access up to where the residential properties are, Lisa. So we have ways of utilising the police or our own staff to contact all the residents.
Thanks very much, Mike. That's Mike Bowden, who is from Fire and Emergency. He's the Assistant Area Manager for Christchurch Metro there. And just saying during that conversation, for residents tomorrow morning early, they'll be putting a drone up there to check for the hot spots. It is almost 21 minutes past 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Keen for your feedback on anything you hear on the program tonight. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or you can email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. A former rugby coach from South Otago has escaped jail after severely injuring a young man by penetrating him with a pool cue. Instead, Benjamin Roger Keach will pay his victim emotional harm reparation and serve a sentence of community detention. Our Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown was in court and filed this report. And just a warning, the details may be distressing for some listeners.
When the Kenny Rogers song The Gambler was performed in the Rosebank Lodge in Balclutha late on June the 20th, it seemed innocent enough. A group of rugby players at the pub pulled down their pants and danced to the song, a team tradition. But after the song, as 3 of the players stood at a table, still naked from the waist down, Benjamin Keach, a former coach of a rival club, picked up a pool cue and thrust it at the backside of one of the players. Judge Kevin Phillips says the outcome for the young man was severe.
He was taken to the Balclutha Hospital by police, where he was then transferred to the public hospital in Dunedin and underwent surgery.
The young man suffered severe internal injuries as a result of the incident and spent 9 weeks off work. Judge Phillips says the victim's life has been ruined.
He had underwent the surgery under a general anaesthetic. Numerous stitches were required to his sphincter. They broke. He had to take pain medication, which made him physically ill. That his wound, as at the 8th of December, continues to break down. He will have to undergo further reconstructive surgery.
The injury ended his rugby season, and he may never play again. Also concerning, Judge Phillips says, is the response from some in the area that the 2 men call home.
In the small town that they come from, the area that they live within, the community that they are part of. People saying it was a joke, a bit of fun. It's blown out of proportion.
Keech spoke in the same terms when he explained his actions to the police. The 40-year-old described his actions as a bit of a laugh and that he meant the victim no harm when he gave him, quote, a firm poke with the pool cue. Prosecutor Craig Power says it's anything but a laughing matter.
Well, I would describe it, sir, as a forceful upward thrust with the pool cue as it was, with two hands. That's not some tomfoolery gives someone a bit of a poke.
No.
It was a forceful lunging action.
Mr Power told the court imprisonment is the starting point for sentencing, but imposing home detention is appropriate. Keech was originally charged with sexual violation, but pleaded guilty in September to causing injury with reckless disregard. Keech's lawyer, John Westgate, says his client had too much to drink on the night in question and was thinking like an idiot.
30 seconds of madness doesn't define this man, this defendant. It just doesn't. And there is no doubt that next to the victim, the person in that pub that night, the next person who was most surprised was this man, because he didn't even realize what he had done. And when he found out, he was punched twice in the head. And that's when he realized something was wrong.
Mr Westgate argued against home detention as it would cost Keech his building business and income. Instead, Judge Phillips ordered Keech to pay his victim $12,000 in reparation and sentenced him to 6 months community detention with a weekend curfew and 250 hours of community work. From the Dunedin District Court, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
Even our summer plans can't be spared from the ongoing threat of COVID-19. The government's released details on how it would respond to coronavirus spreading in the community this summer. It includes a rehashed wage subsidy scheme and one-off payments for isolating staff. And it's urging people to be prepared for last-minute changes to their holidays. Our political reporter Charlie Drever has the details.
A summer message with a difference.
Slip, slop, slap and scan.
COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says prevention is key to making sure COVID-19 doesn't ruin the holiday break. The government spreading that message with an ad campaign.
Ooh, I think he just stopped summer.
If COVID cases in the community do bring summer to a screeching halt, the government's been planning for various scenarios. For example, if there's an outbreak at a campsite or festival, people would need to stay where they are until the situation's assessed. Dr. Ashley Bloomfield's urging people to be prepared to stay longer at their holiday destinations before heading off this year.
Just make sure you know who can feed the cat or the dog and just what else you might need to do. And especially if you're in a remote location that you may just take some extra supplies and try and keep in contact with the news just on a regular basis.
But in the worst case scenario, like a high risk of widespread transmission, people would likely be asked to head home. The government would then need to consider moving the country or large parts of it to alert level 3. Chris Hipkins is confident our national airline will step up to the plate.
We know from our last experience with this, Air New Zealand in particular worked very, very hard to make sure they helped to accommodate people's need to travel, and I'm sure that there would be goodwill there from them to help us to do that if we needed to do it.
For areas at alert level 2 or higher for longer than a week, businesses could be eligible for the government's new resurgence support payment, similar to the wage subsidy scheme. From early next year, a one-off payment of $350 per worker has been set up for those who have to isolate while waiting for a COVID test result.
We do acknowledge that, if a business ended up with several staff having to be tested and having to isolate, that's a significant impost on that business, and particularly for a small business. So we want to be able to support them there. We don't want the financial cost to be an impediment to people doing what we're asking them to do, which is to isolate while they're waiting for a test.
Touch wood, these measures won't be needed.
However, in these situations, you plan for the worst and do everything to ensure that, in fact, we don't get into that situation. I am confident in the planning that has happened across government and across the health system, and we won't be taking any chances.
It was the Minister and Dr. Bloomfield's last COVID briefing of the year, and they're hoping it remains that way. From Parliament, for Checkpoint, Ko Charlie Drever, DNA.
After a long and at times uncertain lead-up, the America's Cup Regatta starts this week, with 4 teams competing for their chance to race for sailing's most coveted trophy. Today, teams and their families gathered at Auckland's Viaduct Harbour for a dawn ceremony, followed by the official opening of the race village. 3 challenger teams are taking part, as well as defender Team New Zealand, with racing due to begin on Thursday. Amy Williams and camera operator Dan Cook were there for the ceremony.
Several hundred people gathered for the official opening, with Auckland's clear blue sky and sparkling harbour as the backdrop. Ngāti Whātua Ōrākei blessed the village and welcomed the overseas challengers of the Cup with a pōwhiri and karakia. Although no international tourists are here for the regattas, many families of those working for the challenger teams are here to show their support. Ubaldo Bruni completed managed isolation after arriving from Italy a few months ago. His dad's a helmsman with Luna Rossa Prada.
It was pretty nice because we did the quarantine, which was a bit tough, but now it's amazing. And like talking to the people from Italy, and they're in lockdown, and so it's a blessing, yes.
He's been attending high school in Auckland.
I'm doing correspondence from Italy, and then I went to school here to know some people. And but it finished a week ago. So yeah, nice.
Candela Fernandez is also here supporting her dad, who works for American Magic as a lawyer.
Yeah, I've been here for 2 months too, and I go to school here, and I'm doing some work from Spain to catch up. But yeah, it's fun.
She hopes to travel around New Zealand with her family after the Cup final.
Yeah, we're planning to maybe go to the South Island after the races are finished, and that would be really nice, yeah.
The government's contributed $136.5 million, and Auckland Council has contributed $113 million to the America's Cup event and infrastructure. Auckland Mayor Phil Goff admits he worried earlier this year the global pandemic would be too big a headwind for the Cup.
I've got to say, in the last year, I wondered whether all of that effort that we had put in would be lost as COVID-19 swept the world. So when we are here to open the races today, it is a cause for celebration. That we are sitting here, I'm looking around the crowd, I don't see a face mask, I don't see any social distancing, because you're safe not to do that at the present time.
After speeches, each team was introduced and all 4 stood side by side for a photo and watched a haka. Ord Sasari is here to support American Magic, the team her husband works for. It was the first time she'd experienced a traditional Māori welcome.
The multicultural atmosphere here is something very special, and I think for everybody, especially for kids too, to see these different cultures and to be part of it, it's very nice.
She's glad to be here, having stayed in managed isolation with her children, who have been attending a local school since they arrived.
It's not quite an experience to stay in the hotel for 2 days, but we're very grateful to be there, so it was nice to be there at the end, to have the opportunity to be here now.
After the opening ceremony, America's Cup Minister Stuart Nash took a tour of the Team New Zealand base.
This is really high tech. So, these aren't yachtsmen designing a yacht. These are engineers designing a yacht. It blows your mind, actually. I had no idea.
He'll be on a spectator boat to watch Saturday's racing and reckons the events will attract people to the city.
I think this will capture the imagination of New Zealanders because it's different. The races are short, they're 25 minutes as opposed to 2.5 hours. You can watch it from the shore, so it's a real spectator sport. And there's a hell of a lot to do down here as well. So this will be the place to be when the yachting is on. I have no doubt about that. So I'm expecting Kiwis to travel.
The America's Cup trophy was on display at the Viaduct Harbour this morning for passers-by to see. At the end of the ceremony, the 4 teams headed back out on the water for one final day of practice racing before the Prada America's Cup World Series starts on Thursday, leading into the first weekend of racing. For Checkpoint, Amy Williams.
Coming up on on Checkpoint on RNZ National. The gas fitter who worked on a Christchurch home the day before it exploded is ordered to pay the victims tens of thousands of dollars. We talked to a former rugby player with a suspected brain disease caused by repeated head knocks. And it just got tougher for property investors to borrow money. We've got the details. We'd love your feedback on anything you've heard on the program this evening. Get in touch. You can text us on 2101, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or flick us an email. The address is checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. Susanna's here now with the headlines.
Residents in the North Canterbury town of Clarence have told how they rushed to a crashed helicopter this afternoon and helped pull seriously injured people and the bodies of 2 crash victims from the wreckage. The helicopter had 5 people on board, including 3 children, when it came down on the beach at Kekerengu. Local resident Ian Mertens has told Checkpoint he rushed to help after seeing the aircraft twisting out of control when trying to land. He says it was a mangled mess on the beach by the time he got there. Sparks from a construction site are being blamed for today's large scrub fire in Christchurch's Port Hills that led to 16 homes being evacuated for a time today. Choppers with monsoon buckets and dozens of firefighters managed to contain the fire, and residents have now been allowed back. Assistant Area Commander Mike Bowden told Checkpoint the blaze started when workers cutting steel sent sparks flying onto tinder-dry grass. He wants people working outside in the tinder-dry conditions to take precautions. The government says summer holiday makers need to be ready for a change of plans if they're caught up in an outbreak of COVID-19. The COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says a localised outbreak could see people having to stay put in a localised outbreak. But it is found to have spread. If it's found to have spread, they'll have to pack up and return home. The gas fitter who worked on a Christchurch home before it exploded last year has been ordered to pay more than $134,000 in emotional harm payments. Gregory Smith worked on the gas fire installed in the Northwood home the day before it exploded, destroying the house and injuring 6 people. In the district court in Christchurch today, he was also ordered to complete 325 hours of community service. US President-elect Joe Biden has said the will of the people prevailed after his election victory was confirmed by the US Electoral College. Speaking after the announcement, he's said the US democracy has been pushed, tested and threatened and proved to be resilient, true and strong. Those are the latest news headlines from RNZ National. Our next news and weather update is at 6.
Thanks, Susanna. If you're just joining us, this is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. And Nicholas Poynton has joined me in the studio for business news. Nicholas, you want to talk about new consumer data that shows the gap between the young and the old is widening. Do we need to get into the debate about what is young and what is old?
I think people will be able to work that out for themselves, because today we got the Westpac Bank's measure of consumer confidence. And while the ANZ Bank, they measure this month to month, Westpac does it on a quarterly basis. And given the size and the scale of their survey, it actually gives us a lot more detail and insight about how consumer confidence, how confident New Zealanders are feeling across their age, their incomes and different regions in the country. So beginning with the headline number, yes, as you would have probably expect, there was a significant turnaround in consumer confidence, given that in the September quarter we saw consumer confidence fall back to its worst level since the 2008 global financial crisis. So it's now back up to 106, still slightly below its long run average of about 111. And we did see over this period a slight improvement in people who expected to be better off financially next year. But as the bank's senior economist Satish Ranchod, I was talking to him, I asked him what has really been driving this turnaround, and he put a lot of it down to some of these measures that have been taken by the Reserve Bank in terms of its monetary policy. He says that the surging property market, that is giving a lot of people confidence to go out there and spend. People are seeing the values of their properties increase and they feel compelled to go out there and buy stuff. But not everybody is a homeowner, and this is why people who have a house, they've seen the biggest rise in consumer confidence, and that tends to be older people, while people aged 18 to 29, they were the most downbeat in the survey, with many saying their financial position had actually deteriorated over the course of the year. And they were also the least optimistic that their fortunes were going to improve next year. So, and because of the effects of the pandemic, because they're likely to be prolonged, there's going to be no pullback on these forces we can actually probably foresee in the near future. that are really driving up house prices, we can probably expect this gap to actually widen and be further exacerbated. But the data also gives us a bit of a breakdown of what is happening across the regions. Confidence in every region has increased, but it turns out that the Hawke's Bay and the Gisborne region was the most optimistic region in this country when it comes to consumer confidence. We saw a 25-point leap across the 3 months to December. The main reason for that is because that region is a real agricultural hub. They've been seeing, really strong prices in terms of exports. That's really fueling the optimism that many people there have. At the other end of the spectrum, there's Otago, which is by far the most pessimistic. It's the only region to have its index, or its measure on the index, below 100, which signals contraction, and that's because of its exposure to international tourism. But look, one number that came in at the end that I thought was a real surprise was that when you look at the confidence by wage bracket, people who earned over $100,000 were the least confident. Well, people who earned up to $50,000 were the most confident. I wonder if this is giving fuel or weight to that old adage that with more money comes more problems. But I wonder, I didn't actually have the opportunity to ask the Westpac's economists about what might be driving that, but maybe it could be as people age, as they retire, their income's a lot more passive. But at that stage, they probably don't have the same worries that young people maybe have, those sorts of things. And in terms of what people are spending their money on, turns out we're spending a lot more money on hospitality services. One thing about lockdown is people do want to go out there, experience the nightlife, things like that. And also major household items. That time at home has maybe seen more people think about how can we improve things. Maybe it's time for a better fridge, a nicer piece of art, maybe a nice carpet on the ground.
I do find it interesting that homeowners are increasingly confident about their financial position because of the rising price of the house. Because without stating the obvious, it's not real money until you sell it.
Well, that's the thing, though, people. But I looked at a report today from the ANZ Bank, and they were talking about property prices. And one of the things that they've talked about is that there is just this belief, and they pointed the finger a little bit here at the media, that house prices are going to continue to rise. It's driving this real FOMO culture, and everybody wants to be in the market. So I wonder if that's maybe feeding into that there a bit as well.
Yep, really interesting. Let's have a trot around the markets.
NZX down 68 points to 12,767. Our dollar is at 70.7 US cents, still hovering quite strong against the greenback. 94.1 Australian. And because of these ongoing talks in the UK, we're still quite strong against the British pounds, buying 53.04 British pence.
Wow, that is strong. Thanks, Nicholas. Nicholas Poynton there with business. The country's biggest bank is ordering a bigger deposit from investors as a way to cool the overheated housing market. ANZ says its move will help first home buyers get into the market, but will it work? Our housing reporter Eva Corlett with this story.
ANZ's raised the bar for property investors, saying if they want a mortgage with them, they'll have to stump up a 40% deposit. It used to be 30%. Criteria for other buyers remains the same. In the last 2 months, a third of ANZ's residential mortgage lending has gone to investors and just over 18% to first home buyers. ANZ spokesperson Ben Kelleher says the changes are an attempt to level the playing field.
It's really about us adjusting our settings to help bring a bit more balance back, and particularly to help first home buyers where we see the property prices really escalating to a point where it could lock out that group for a number of years. So we're just trying to do our part as New Zealand's largest home lender, and we expect to be able to have a really good conversation with the RBNZ in the new year around this as well.
But long-time property investor Ollie Newland doesn't think one bank upping its restrictions by 10% will make a difference.
If they're using other properties to put up a security, then that 30 to 40% won't make much difference at all. If they get into groups of people coming together to buy and invest in property, which is common, that'll make even less effect. I think it will have very little effect on its own.
In fact, he thinks it will have unintended consequences.
Property investors are necessary because what do they do with the property when they buy them? They rent them out, and it helps keep rents down. If there are fewer property investors, there'll be fewer rentals. And that's where the problem lies, and we see that already. The more homelessness, more rentals, and more renters, rents going up. This is, I think, is the right answer.
But there are a lot of people that don't want to be renting. They want to be in a house of their own.
Yes, that's always been the case. There's always people who want to be in the market, but I'm afraid the reality of the capitalist system is that not everybody can own everything. But I don't think this is the answer at all. It may be a small tick, but I think the real answer is A, more houses, of course, and B, fewer controls on rentals.
Sharon Culwick from the New Zealand Property Investors Federation says where there is a will, there is a way for property investors.
Often we're at the mercy of the banks, but there's always second-tier lenders that property investors can go to if they really want to carry on the investing career. So as long as there's options for property investors, they'll find options that they can carry on.
And she doesn't buy that this is simply the bank wanting to do right by first home buyers.
It seems very unusual that the bank would be trying to balance first-home buyers getting into the market over investors. My take on that would probably be that looking at their own risk involved in that and think that it's safer to invest in an owner-occupier property than an investment property. I don't think it's really them probably looking at the economy and thinking what's the best for the economy. I think they'll be looking at what is the best for them.
But ANZ's Ben Kelleher denies the move is related to risk or the bank's financial stability.
We assess every customer on an affordability basis, so we don't have any concerns there. This is more of a concern around just making sure that we can make, home buying accessible to as many people as possible. And so we're just trying to adjust our settings just to get that balance back.
Senior housing economist at CoreLogic, Calvin Davidson, believes ANZ's move is a sign of things to come.
Once that first mover has gone, we may see it from other banks as well. I'm not saying all the banks would follow, but you do wonder whether this is a signal of more to come, and it may well be this is where the Reserve Bank ends up anyway. And so even if a bank doesn't want to do it, they might have no choice because it's mandated by the Reserve Bank.
Mr Davidson says last time there was a 40% deposit requirement for investors was in 2017. That helped slash roughly 8% of investors' market share over a year, but all banks were involved. Mr Davidson says it's hard to tell how much impact ANZ will have alone. BNZ, Kiwibank and ASB have told RNZ they won't be upping their restrictions for investors from 30%. The RBNZ will formally reintroduce restrictions in March. Mō te hōtaka o te ahia hinei, ko Eva Corlett tēnei.
In the UK, London and other parts of south-east England are preparing to move back into the highest level of COVID-19 restrictions. A new variant of the coronavirus has been identified, which is causing concern for authorities. The ABC's Samantha Hawley reports.
Any pre-Christmas cheer has been wiped away.
I need to tell the House that over the last week, we've seen very sharp exponential rises in the virus.
Less than a fortnight after a second national lockdown ended, the virus is out of control again, and it's mutating. The British Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, delivered the bad news.
We have identified a new variant of coronavirus, which may be associated with the fastest spread in the southeast of England. Initial analysis suggests that this variant is growing faster than the existing variants.
The British government says it's informed the World Health Organisation, and similar variants have been identified in other countries.
Mr. Speaker, I must stress at this point that there is currently nothing to suggest that this variant is more likely to cause serious disease, and the latest clinical advice is that it's highly unlikely that this mutation would fail to respond to a vaccine. But it shows we've got to be vigilant.
But with the Pfizer vaccine being rolled out across the UK, there is concern. Conservative MP Jeremy Hunt.
When will we know for sure? Are there any trials going on? Is he going to get more up-to-date scientific information on this anytime soon?
As I said in my statement, the medical advice that we have is that it is highly unlikely that this new variant will impinge the vaccine and the impact of the vaccine, but we will know that in the coming days and weeks.
The British capital is among the locations to be moved into the highest level of restrictions on Wednesday. The super spreaders are high school students, although the increase is now in all age groups. The capital's mayor, Sadiq Khan, wants schools shut now, just a week earlier than they're due to break for Christmas.
Well, we've seen that the biggest age group in relation to the increase of the virus is those aged between 10 and 19. The last week for which we have numbers shows a 75% increase in 10 to 19-year-olds catching this virus.
The new restrictions mean all hospitality venues will need to close, bringing pre-Christmas economic and emotional gloom to a normally vibrant festive city.
I know these steps are hard, but we must not waver as we enter the final stretch.
Boris Johnson has promised to lift the restrictions for 5 days over Christmas so families can gather. But scientists warn all that will lead to is an even harsher lockdown in January.
That was the ABC's Samantha Hawley. It is 17 minutes away from 6. I'm Lisa Owen and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. A former rugby player with a suspected degenerative brain disease caused by repeated traumas wants other players to be fully aware of the risk and for New Zealand Rugby to do more to help those who have it. In the UK, former players suffering brain injuries are taking legal action, claiming rugby authorities failed to protect them from concussions. Ross Devlin says he suffered multiple concussions playing club rugby in the 90s and early 2000s and noticed changes in his personality and behaviour. Following another knock in a car accident in 2017, he went looking for answers. In August, an ACC-appointed neuropsychologist diagnosed Ross with potential CTE, or chronic traumatic encephalopathy. A definitive diagnosis is only possible with a brain autopsy after someone dies, but it can cause dementia-like symptoms, including memory loss and mood swings and depression. I spoke to Ross Devlin and asked how hard it was to even get a diagnosis.
It was extremely hard to get the acknowledgement. It took about 2 years just to convince my GP that there was more than just concussion going on. Yeah, it was extremely hard.
And what was that like for you?
It was a fight. It was a battle. At times you feel let down completely by all those around you. Like the only person that I could turn to was my wife, and even my own family sort of didn't understand what I was trying to fight for. And I had a lot of people tell me, what are you looking for? What do you want? And I said, all I want is for my family to be looked after when I can't look after them.
So, Ross, tell me about your symptoms and how this is affecting your life.
So, early symptoms through my 20s, basically, I would have verbal arguments. It started out that I'd just be aggressive on the rugby field, and as soon as I got off the rugby field, that was fine. When it became apparent that there was actually something else going on, my wife was talking to me about depression and being angry at home, and my teammates were saying, sort of on the rugby field, they were saying, calm down, you don't need to react to that. That's when I sort of started to know that there was something more than just a bad behaviour or a bad personality. Yeah.
So Ross, so that we understand this properly, this was a change in your personality. This is not how you acted before.
Well, I went from enjoying going to the Wellington Sevens on both days to not being able to sit in the crowd on a Saturday. So I used to go on the Fridays and not go on the Saturdays because I couldn't cope with the noise. I couldn't cope with the crowd. That went through to I couldn't go to concerts. It was too loud. It was too many people around. And later on into my 30s, it came to the point where the only way I could motivate myself was through anger.
So you are a tradie, was your occupation, and a manager. Yep. Can you still do those jobs?
No, not at all. Not at all. Before my last accident, I had a failed attempt at being just a manager so that I could, try and push my career forward and look after my family in the long run. The personal relationships failed with my staff and my boss because I was too direct, too blunt, basically.
And in terms of your memory, have you had any issues with your memory?
Through my teenage years, from the first lot of concussions, I never really remembered a childhood as such. Part of that has come back because I've worked on memory and talking to my family. So that's partially come back, and other than that, most of my memory is okay.
So you had a car crash in about 2017 and that sent you on a path to get this diagnosis. But what part do you think rugby played in the condition that you're now suffering? Because obviously you had a concussion in the car crash, but what about your rugby years?
So my rugby years, due to the way rugby's played, you're physical. And that was the part that I absolutely loved about the game. It pushed me to play as much as possible. So if I had a concussion or a suspected concussion, I would actually, 3 weeks stand down is a 3 week stand down. So I'd push the boundaries and I'd be back playing by the end of that 3 weeks. And that's still the medical perceived concussion recovery at this stage, and it's 2020, so.
Do you think you were going back on the field when you weren't properly healed?
Oh, absolutely. Or I just downplay the fact that I was concussed at all. There was a game in 2002, a club final, where I was concussed early into the first half, within the first 7 minutes of the game, and I actually remember waking up at the end of the game and just not understanding why we were down by 3 points, and we came back and won that game. Not through anything I did, but I walked off the field awake, but I played the whole game asleep, and I've seen video footage of that. And you could not tell that I was concussed or not in control that whole game.
How many concussions do you reckon you got playing rugby?
Rugby, I believe 6 full knockouts. That doesn't entail any subconcussive knocks. I don't know how to get that information.
6 full knockouts while playing rugby, you think?
Yep.
In between those concussions, did you take proper breaks, or at the end of that stand-down period, did you go straight back to it?
Straight back into it. There's nothing that could have kept me off the rugby field. There's at that time, you're motivated just to play rugby. You're ingrained in it. You're coached to it. All coaches want their best players on the field. I was in that. In my teams that I played in, I was in the percentage where if I could be on the field, they'd put me on.
It begs the question, doesn't it, Ross? Whose fault is it? Because do you take responsibility for part of that, and who else is responsible?
Yeah, I do take responsibility for part of it, and that's why I've come forward basically to say, yep, I take responsibility for my actions of now that I know. And the education around concussion has changed in the last 3 years. But to be honest, it doesn't go far enough. Who do I think should take some more responsibility is actually the medical side are well behind in what they are suggesting is okay. 3 weeks, 23 days for an under 16, I believe, is not long enough for a concussion. A concussion, concussion is brain damage, in my opinion.
So what about New Zealand rugby?
New Zealand rugby, I think they need to be to start listening to the advice from around the world, not just from the European Medical Council. there is information that it's gone right through the NFL that has changed the NFL. Why can't our professional companies look into some of the stuff that's gone on there? And even the NFL refused this information for years and years, even knowing they were damaging people. They still changed.
Do you think New Zealand Rugby is open to hearing about this? Have you tried to contact them? And are they, do you think, open to the struggles of some players who have brain injuries?
Absolutely not. NZRFU will not openly discuss anything about concussions or brain injuries to any member of the public, in my opinion. I've tried on a number of occasions. I've even tried to, thinking that, I was a player, so I should be able to go through the players' union. They don't want to hear anything negative against the sport. It's a closed shop to discussing anything that would open them up to being, liable for anything.
So you think they need to do more?
I think they absolutely not only need to do more, but they need to start making some rules for the people that they employ. Not only the people they employ, but the people that are in the club scene need to be looked after. You don't just look after a player by saying, "Here, have 3 weeks off and don't do too much." You need to support them, and that's where medical support needs to catch up with the science of it.
And that was Ross Devlin, who has been diagnosed with potential CTE, which is a degenerative brain disease brought on by a number of traumas to the head. He is a former rugby player. One of our listeners has got in touch on the sentencing of the person who assaulted another man with a pool cue. He says, or this person says, Andrew says, "I'm utterly blown away that the culprit will not do time in jail. I hope the financial compensation due the victim is very considerable. No, I just heard it's an obscenely paltry 12K. How on earth is that acceptable?"
RNZ News at 6, ngā mihi nui ko Susana Leata tēnei. A witness to a helicopter crash north of Kaikoura says 3 injured people pulled from the wreckage were children. 5 people were on board the helicopter in total and 2 died in the incident near Clarence this afternoon. Emergency services were called to the crash on the beach at about 20 to 1 and won't confirm the ages or genders of those involved. But Clarence resident Ian Mertens, who watched the helicopter fall from the sky, told RNZ it seemed like a family.
Probably the youngest would be 7 or 8, and the next young fellow would be about 10, and the other girl would be in the teens. She was a bit heavy to carry out, but the other one's all right.
Crash witness Ian Mertens. The government's issued guidelines for preparations summer holiday makers need to make in case they're caught up in an outbreak of COVID-19. It's also warning everyone may need to pack up their holiday gear and return home if the outbreak is found to have spread widely. The COVID-19 Response Minister Chris Hipkins says people need to be prepared for their plans to change and carry extra supplies, as well as washing their hands using the COVID Tracer app and staying home if they're sick. Mr Hipkins says if there is an outbreak at a campsite or festival, people would need to initially stay where they are while officials assess the situation. The police have spoken to a 36-year-old man in relation to hate speech being left outside Christchurch mosques. An investigation has been ongoing after a far-right message was written in chalk on the footpath outside Al Noor and Linwood mosques on Saturday. Police said today chalk messages were written outside the mosques and police stations around the city. Canterbury Commander Superintendent John Price says the act has drawn a lot of attention from the public and people should continue to report any suspicious behaviour. The man's appeared in the Christchurch District Court today on unrelated matters. The gas fitter, who worked on a Christchurch home the day before it exploded, has been ordered to pay victims more than $130,000 and ordered to do 325 hours of community work. Gregory Smith worked on the gas fire in the Northwood home but never sealed the gas pipe. The next day the house exploded. Sally Murphy reports.
After a WorkSafe investigation, Smith and his company, Gas Unlimited, were charged.
He pleaded guilty and was sentenced in the District Court in Christchurch today. Judge Tony Zorup credited Smith's swift action in coming forward, pleading guilty and taking part in restorative justice when he handed down his sentence today. He sentenced Smith to pay victims over $134,000 in emotional harm payments and ordered he complete 325 hours of community service. In Christchurch, Sally Murphy.
The police monitoring trucks on the road between Northport and Auckland have found almost 1 in 5 failed safety tests and posed a serious risk to the public. The police checks coincided with an abnormally large number of trucks moving freight between the two destinations after a large container ship bound for Auckland had to dock at Whangarei. Kate Gudsell reports.
Trucks were expected to make about 800 additional trips over a week between the two destinations, carrying about 1,200 containers. More than 500 vehicles were inspected and 100 of them failed the inspections. 11 trucks had faults so serious they had to be taken off the road. The single biggest problem was lighting faults, but there were a high number of failures relating to tyres and brakes. The police issued 81 infringement notices and 21 written warnings. Call Kate Gudsell.
The America's Cup Regatta starts this week with 4 teams competing for their chance to race for sailing's most coveted trophy. Teams and their families gathered at Auckland's Viaduct Harbour for a dawn ceremony this morning, followed by the official opening of the race village. 3 challenger teams are taking part, as well as defender Team New Zealand, with racing due to begin on Thursday. US President-elect Joe Biden has spoken following the affirmation of his victory by the Electoral College. Mr Biden received 302 votes after California's 55 electors put him over the 270 votes needed. Electors from all 50 states gathered in their capitals today to cast their ballots. The President-elect says American democracy works and the will of the people prevailed.
Even in the face of a public health crisis unlike anything we've experienced in our lifetimes, the people voted. They voted in record numbers. More Americans voted this year than have ever voted in the history of the United States of America. Over 155 million Americans were determined to have their voices heard and their votes counted.
The confirmation comes as the country surpasses 300,000 COVID-19 related deaths and as the first Pfizer vaccinations are administered. It's 5 minutes past 6. The final of the Women's Cricket World Cup to be held in New Zealand in 2022 will be played under lights at Hagley Oval in Christchurch. The schedule for the tournament running from March 4th to April 3rd has been announced today, with the opening match of the 31-game tournament to be played at Tauranga's Bay Oval.
The World Cup was initially due to be held in February and March next year, but was postponed because of the global pandemic. This afternoon, Deputy Prime Minister Grant Robertson officially turned on Hagley Oval's new lights for the first time. The White Ferns will play a yet-to-be-decided qualifier in the tournament opener in Tauranga, while Auckland, Hamilton, Wellington, Christchurch and Dunedin will all host matches. There'll be $5.5 million in prize money for the tournament, an increase of almost 60% on the previous event in 2017. This is Stephen Hewson.
A third of Japanese residents want the Tokyo Olympics to be scrapped amid fears that an influx of foreign arrivals may cause a further spike in COVID-19 cases. The 2020 Olympics were delayed by a year due to the global pandemic. But as Japan grapples with a third wave of infections, a poll by public broadcaster NHK reveals 32% of respondents want the Games to be cancelled entirely. The Wallabies captain Michael Hooper has been awarded the John Eales Medal as Australia's Player of the Year, joining former fullback Israel Folau as the only players to have won the award 3 times. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Tony Stamp shares the Song Crush stage with Kiwi music duo Earth Tongue, Gussie Larkin and Ezra Simons. Our philosopher Anne Kerwin offers an introduction into the thinking of Lee McIntyre, author of Post-Truth. Speaking of which, the BBC Arts Hour features Dolly Parton talking about losing a Dolly Parton lookalike competition. And who cares what she looks like? It's the radio. With me, Brian Crump, afternoon news at 7 on RNZ National.
Now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight tomorrow. All the North Island fine, apart from a few areas of morning and evening cloud. Nelson and Marlborough fine weather. Buller and Westland mostly cloudy with fine spells during the afternoons. Patchy drizzle tomorrow morning. Canterbury mainly fine, however some coastal low cloud tonight and tomorrow morning. Otago fine tonight, cloud increasing tomorrow, rain spreading north to Dunedin by late afternoon or evening. Southland fine tonight, rain developing tomorrow afternoon. Fiordland areas of drizzle developing this evening, turning to rain tomorrow. And Chatham Islands cloudy periods. RNZ National, it's coming up to 8 minutes past 6.
Thanks, Susanna. Kia ora anō. This is Checkpoint and I'm Lisa Owen. Construction sites are being asked to have firefighting water on hand after sparks from a steel cutter caused an 18-hectare blaze in Christchurch's Port Hills today. 4 choppers with monsoon buckets and 28 firefighters with hoses hit the blaze with everything they had late this morning. By 2 this afternoon, the fire was contained and residents have now been allowed back in their homes. Conan Young is near where the fire started in Redcliffs and joins me now. Hi, Conan. How close did this fire actually get to destroying homes?
Yeah, look, only about 20 metres away from a collection of homes you can probably see over my left shoulder. It actually started at, this construction site. It's a subdivision. It looks like another home's been built there. These guys apparently were cutting some steel and some sparks caught in the very tinder dry grass that's right next to them. And within minutes the whole hill had gone up. So 20 metres away from these homes. Unfortunately, we had the easterly wind blowing here today, and that blew the flames away from these houses and up the hill. The fire service actually let the flames move in that direction. They concentrated their efforts with fire hoses around in front of these homes, and also 4 helicopters which ferried water from the nearby estuary just over the other direction, and they managed to get on top of this fire within a few hours. Actually, it was in about 3 hours they really had it contained.
Conan, for people who are listening, I can see there that you're at the base of the hill, but what does, looking back up the hill, can you just describe to us what you can see, and is there any smell still about?
Yeah, no, we can't. I guess, fortunately, because of that wind, it's blowing the smell away from us. You can actually see there's still a couple of firefighters there with hoses. They're dampening down hot spots. They're going to be there actually through the night, just keeping an eye on things, and they'll be back again tomorrow, just trying to ensure that no further flare-ups happen. We were here just before, actually, about an hour and a half ago, and there was a flare-up, and very quickly, huge amounts of smoke, large, high flames, and they actually had to get the helicopters back in action again just to keep that flare-up from turning into anything worse. So really just still quite a volatile situation here at the moment.
So I imagine there's been a few nervous moments for those evacuated residents then.
Yeah, absolutely. So 16 households in all evacuated. People told they couldn't go into their homes. We spoke to one of them. Her name's Elena Saltis, and she said she got a text message at 11:30 saying her home was close to being part of this, close to catching on fire.
At that point, I tried to race home to get my cat and check out my house, and the roads were blocked, so they wouldn't let me come up.
Oh, goodness, what was going through your head?
I was freaking out, because first my cat's in the house, and I just built my house, and I love my house, and it took 3 years to build, so I was really shitting myself. I lost one house in the earthquake. The last thing I wanted to do was lose another one to a fire. Yeah. It's been a hard day.
So what have you been? We're standing here in Barnett Park looking straight up at your house in this quite large area of where the fire's been. Have you been standing here watching it, have you?
I came here earlier when it was in full-fledged. Right when they wouldn't let me up Clifton Hill, then I came here, and because a couple of my other neighbours were down here, they were texting me come to the park. So we all kind of met here and just watched the fire come closer to our house. It was crazy.
Oh, man. And so,
I know, it was crazy watching the fire, and it was skipping down, and then it was going up towards Revelation as well.
Was the fire, did it look like it was going to get on top of the houses, or what was the...
Well, luckily it was an easterly, so it did look like the wind was blowing away from the houses, but it came really close. and there's a lot of scrub up there, so it could easily jump. And it was jumping down the hill, like quite aggressively. Yeah. So you didn't really know which way it was going to go.
Yeah, so as you heard there, a really close call for all of these residents. Well, as soon as we're done here, we'll give Elena a call and see, because she's been allowed back in her home now, along with the other households. We'll give her a call and see if she's tracked down her cat.
Absolutely. It's great that her house is not damaged, but I immediately thought of the cat, Conan, so thanks for that. There's already been a few fires in the hills in the past week. So what is the fire service saying about the risk?
Yeah, look, it's just saying, look, the conditions up there are just so dry at the moment. We saw a fire on Saturday night that was sparked by fireworks. That very quickly turned into something quite dangerous. More homes evacuated on Saturday night in a really tricky section of hill to really be fighting fires, let alone at night time. Then we had some suspicious fires just a few days before that. So look, as we've seen from this fire just caused by sparks, anything, a cigarette tossed from a car, a stone thrown up by a lawnmower could really spark a fire. And, tomorrow we have 30 degrees forecast, nor'west winds, which are just really dangerous when it comes to fires and can see them spread so quickly. So, yeah, the fire service is really on edge at the moment.
Thanks, Conan. That's our reporter Conan Young, who's near Redcliffs there where that fire started. And if you were listening, you could see a massive patch of, charcoal black up on the hill that has obviously been burned by the fire and scarred there. The gas fitter who worked on a Christchurch home the day before it exploded has been ordered to pay victims more than $130,000. Gregory Smith was partway through fixing a gas fire at the Northwood home when he didn't disconnect its gas pipe and failed to tell the homeowner. The next day, the house exploded, destroying the house and injuring 6 people. Sally Murphy reports.
As soon as he heard of the explosion, Gregory Smith made himself known to authorities. Following a WorkSafe investigation, Smith and his company, Gas Unlimited, were charged under the Gas Act, and in September, Smith pled guilty. At his sentencing at the District Court in Christchurch today, the room was full of people impacted by the explosion and their supporters. Crown Prosecutor Dennis Dow read out one of the victims' statements.
No one who was in the house has fully recovered from that horrifying day. It's always going to be with us, physically, mentally, emotionally, with sleepless nights in our everyday life. I still to this day get anxiety when I'm around gas fires and gas cooking, including barbecues.
The victim, who has name suppression, suffered burns to their face, hands and feet. Through their statement, they said they lost everything that day: photos, memories and irreplaceable items.
When I retired, I set to and repainted the interior of my home, replaced the carpet, put new curtains in and invested in a DVS heat transfer system. All of this was with the intention of being able to sit back and enjoy life and the improvements I'd made to my home. This worked out amazingly for 12 months, only to be destroyed in seconds.
The court heard Smith turned the gas off at the mains, but did not cap the gas pipe in the fire. So when the homeowner turned the gas on that night to cook, gas started to leak from the fire. The next morning, a spark from the water cylinder caused the massive explosion. Crown Prosecutor Dennis Dow says the whole thing was avoidable.
It is negligence. It was a mistake, but it was a fundamental mistake.
Gregory Smith's lawyer, Joseph Lill, says his client made a mistake and has accepted full responsibility. Judge Tony Zorab credited Smith's swift action in coming forward, pleading guilty and taking part in restorative justice when he handed down his sentence today.
Mr. Smith is a good citizen, a decent man who's made a terrible error of judgment, which has had significant consequences for him, his family, and also for all of the victims who have suffered as a result of this incident.
He sentenced Smith to pay victims more than $134,000 in emotional harm payments and ordered he complete 325 hours of community service. He also charged Smith's company, Gas Unlimited, $82,500. At the District Court in Christchurch for Checkpoint, Sally Murphy.
It is 17 minutes past 6 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. 2 people have died and 3 are injured after a helicopter crash north of Kaikoura. Emergency services were called to the crash on the beach at about 20 to 1, and one of those first on the scene told Checkpoint 3 of the injured are children. Our reporter Tracy Neal is in Kekerengu where the crash has happened. Tracy, can you see the helicopter from where you are and can you describe that to us?
Yeah, good evening, Lisa. Look, it's I have to say it's an absolutely beautiful evening here, and there's an absolutely tragic scene in front of me here. The helicopter is a wreck on its side on a very stony beach in front of the store in Kekerengu. It's quite a well-known tourist spot here, and there's a heavy police presence here still. And there are 2 bodies being guarded on site.
And so the extent of the damage to the helicopter, what can you see?
From where I was allowed to step, all I can see was a heavily damaged aircraft on its side with what appears to be a large tarpaulin over the cockpit area. It was quite hard to actually determine the extent of the damage from the distance I was able to see from, but it's obviously a very heavy impact landing.
Tracy, what is the landscape like there? I'm looking at a photo, but for people who are just listening, can you just describe what literally the lay of the land there is?
Sure. Well, Kekerengu, of course, is quite well known after the Kaikoura earthquake for having this massive coastal uplift. So it's been it's a fairly high-profile area for that reason. And there's a very stony beach, quite pounding surf. I'm looking out at the Pacific Ocean now, and the helicopter's lying on its side in what appears to be sort of a peninsula area extending off in front of the store. So, as I say, it's a really beautiful evening here and a very big tragedy for a lot of people.
For those unfamiliar with that site, there's no hills, no sort of land obstructions around, and as you say, the weather is good today.
Yeah, the weather is beautiful, but there are big mountains behind me, so the coast sort of ends abruptly and then you go straight up into plateau and then mountains and hills. So, yeah, it's an interesting coastline. People who are familiar with Kaikoura will know it's pretty similar from that point right up to the top northeastern side of the South Island. It's pretty similar the whole way, ocean, beach, mountains.
Tracy, what's nearby? What may they have been coming to or going from? What's around there?
Well, it's the store at Kekerengu. It's a very popular cafe and destination, and for some reason the helicopter is in front of it on that peninsula, but Kaikoura is just south, and there's people, they watch whales offshore here in aircraft, so it's anyone's guess, and I don't know enough about exactly what's happened. I've driven from Nelson. It's taken sort of over 3 hours to get here, so I'm just catching up with what's happened myself.
Thank you for joining us, Tracy. That's Tracy Neal, our reporter on the ground there where that helicopter crash has happened north of Kaikoura. Heavy rainfall is continuing across large parts of New South Wales, with residents being told to evacuate and thousands on standby. The ABC's Gavin Coote reports.
After days of severe weather, the Northern Rivers region of New South Wales has been bracing for significant flooding. Simon Richardson is the mayor of the Byron Shire, where gale force winds and extreme coastal conditions have battered the local beaches and roads.
So it's that sort of high wind, intensive rain, damage that's been done, some of the infrastructure, some roads and causeways. It's the high rain, intensive storm type damage that we've experienced overnight, and we look forward to it easing.
The State Emergency Service has responded to about 200 calls since last night. And this morning it ordered residents in some communities along the Tweed River to evacuate immediately. Floodwaters in that area have begun to reach the driveways of homes around Tumblegum, and they've cut off the Tweed Valley Way, a major road linking the region to the Gold Coast. Those further downstream are still bracing for the worst.
It's mainly the rivers, the real danger at the moment.
did brace the banks anywhere, it'll cause a lot of grief.
Tony Foran manages the Riverview Hotel in South Murwillumbah, where they've been told to prepare to evacuate.
It's lapping to our car park now. It's gone through the park next door, so the park that is beside the hotel, it's all underwater, and it's lapping our car park. We've actually had to close our restaurant for the day because we can't get staff to work.
So those staff, are they busy now preparing at their homes as well?
I'd say so, yeah, mate. Only one of them live on the river, but the rest of them just can't get into work due to the closures of the road.
And if the water keeps rising, how much of a threat could that be for the business there?
Oh, if it rises any more, it'll be a huge threat. It'll go right through our bottle shop and through all our stock. So we don't really want it to rise any more. If we don't get rain at the top, up around Chillingham and where we the river gets the flow from, we'll be pretty safe, I think.
Authorities are also worried about catchments further south. Trevor Wingfield lives on the banks of the Clarence River, west of Grafton.
We just pack up, go to town. The fridges are full of meat and that here all the time. We just go and get the few things we want, and no, we don't get caught out. It'd be a surprise if we do, yeah.
So how long do you think you could be cut off from town and the rest of the region?
Oh, if it don't get any more rain, mate, we'll get out in 24 hours. But if it keeps raining, a major flood, we're shut in here for 2 weeks before we can get out.
And that was the ABC's Gavin Coote reporting there. To the US, where the rollout of the COVID-19 vaccine has begun. A small number have received the jab so far, but it's hoped millions of healthcare workers and nursing home residents could be vaccinated by the end of the year. CNN's Sarah Sidner reports.
This moment could not come soon enough. ICU nurse Sandra Lindsay is one of the first people in the United States to get the COVID-19 vaccine outside of a clinical trial. So is emergency medicine doctor Eve Durasau.
It felt great. It didn't feel any different than receiving any other vaccination that I've received in the past.
Today, workers loaded boxes of Pfizer and BioNTech's vaccine onto trucks by forklift for shipping to medical facilities and hospitals around the country. A historic day that arrived in record time. CNN was there the moment University of Michigan Medical Center staff got the vaccine. A box filled with dry ice and 390 vials. Each vial has 5 doses inside. Once thawed and mixed with saline, it was administered to healthcare workers who have exhausted themselves taking care of coronavirus patients while putting themselves in danger.
The really important thing is that we can now see the horizon. We can see how this is going to end.
From Michigan Medicine to Tampa General Hospital in Florida, something to cheer about finally. After a year of devastating loss, more than 300,000 COVID deaths in America. To medical staff at Ohio State University.
3, 2, 1, vaccinate!
It's momentous. I feel honored to receive it, humbled to receive it. It's a really wonderful day.
The complex task of figuring out how to store and ship the vaccine has been underway for months. The vaccine needs to be kept at ultra-cold temperatures. UPS and FedEx are helping to deliver the vaccine nationwide using a complex package designed by Pfizer called a thermal shipper. Now, after so many months of uncertainty, there is renewed hope this vaccine can start us down what's to be a long road to recovery.
We are exposed to it every minute of every day. So I can't tell you how much this means to me. I feel like I won $1 million lottery getting this vaccine.
And the latest deadliest surge of coronavirus is beginning to ease in the Indian capital, but the number of lives lost has left a deep scar. The ABC's James Oaten reports.
It's been an unrelenting few months for Nandini Passy.
So it's 9:30 right now, and I'm headed for my 24-hour shift.
The young doctor has been living in hospital-provided accommodation just a short walk from work. During the pandemic, she's kept a video diary detailing the long and demanding hours.
I'm so tired, I don't know whether to eat or sleep or take a bath.
During its peak last month, Delhi was recording 5 deaths an hour and more than 8,000 daily cases. The rate of infection is now a quarter of that, but intensive care wards are still full. That's because the symptoms of coronavirus patients is far worse, and younger people are also being admitted to hospital more than previous waves.
There was a mindset that the young are not infected, but that's not true. Sometimes they get much more a severe infection. There have been patients who stayed for over a month in the hospital.
Dr. Farah Hussain oversees an ICU at Delhi's largest coronavirus hospital, LNJP.
We recently lost a 25-year-old. So we are seeing young patients in the early 40s and early 50s who are coming with very bad disease.
She says COVID-19 is still an unpredictable disease, and the sheer scale of infections means doctors are witnessing the gamut of symptoms.
What I do want to mention is that even though we were expecting a number of rise in the cases, what we were not expecting was a rise in the severity that was seen in the younger and the middle age group.
Given India's huge population, there's plenty of capacity for further surges. The country is now pinning its hopes on a vaccine rollout, which could begin as early as January.
And construction has started on a massive new plane hangar at Ohakia Air Base in one of the largest and most complex projects Defence has ever undertaken. Hamish Cardwell reports.
The new Defence Minister, Penny Henare, turned sod at the site of the facility, which will spread over an area the size of 3 football fields. The new facility, named Te Wharitoroa, is to house the new larger P-8A Poseidon planes, which begin being rolled out in 2023. Mr. Henare says after delays caused by COVID-19, it's thrilling for building to crack on in earnest.
Today marks a significant milestone, one that has been hard fought. We want to see the skies over the mighty Manawatu buzzing again, and of course that is incredibly exciting.
Mr. Henare says the aircraft will allow New Zealand to fulfil its duties as an international citizen.
The P-8 aircraft will deliver support to New Zealand's maritime surveillance activities, resource protection, humanitarian and disaster responses here in Aotearoa and to the Pacific and abroad.
The project will cost about $250 million and hundreds will be employed to build it. When it's done, the New Zealand Air Force No. 5 Squadron will relocate from Whenuapai in Auckland to the base. Air Force Chief Air Vice Marshal Andrew Clark says 250-odd staff are looking forward to the move.
Our people are looking forward to integrating into the community and contributing not just to life on base, but the local schools, businesses, and raising families here in the region.
And that was Hamish Cardwell reporting there. Thanks for tuning in this evening. Don't forget, First Up will be back with you first thing from tomorrow morning, and we'll catch you tomorrow evening.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A witness to a helicopter crash north of Kaikoura says 3 injured people pulled from the wreckage were children. 2 other people died in the crash. 16 households that evacuated this afternoon due to a fire in the Christchurch's Port Hills are returning home. The police monitoring trucks on the road between Northport and Auckland have found almost 1 in 5 failed safety tests and posed a serious risk to the public. Evacuations are underway in northern New South Wales after days of wild weather led to floods and damaged coastlines. Our next news and weather is at 7.
Take the pulse of the day's news every weeknight at 10. Why is it called the Goldilocks zone?
This is the area around red dwarf stars where it's not too hot and not too cold.
Live with local, national and international stories as they happen.
If we get an announcement from the Prime Minister soon after Christmas, then businesses can start planning and start rebuilding after what has been an absolute horror year for so many tourism businesses.
Up to date if you're up late. Lately with Karen Hay every weeknight from 10 on RNZ National.
Thanks, Karen. Brian Crump getting ready for another night on RNZ National. Now, before